Hi, I'm Catherine Watkin of Selling from the Heart, and I'm going to talk about the question, do you really need to be consistent in your marketing in order to be successful in your business? So I'm Catherine Watkin. My business is called Selling from the Heart. My specialist thing is helping small business owners who've gone into business because they're passionate about making a difference to other people to get more clients without resorting to sleazy or manipulative sales techniques in the process, which is a method that I believe is actually even more effective than a lot of those traditional sales techniques that can actually make us uncomfortable and be off-putting for our clients. And I also, once people can sell effectively, I then love to work with them on creating a business they can love. So a business that is successful, that they can fall in love with, stay in love with over the long term, and run without compromising their values or their integrity. So as I like to put it sometimes, it's about creating great businesses from doing good work and being good people. So as I said, I want to talk today about, is it really as important as everybody seems to say it is to be consistent in your marketing? And the reason I ask the question is because I've been in business now for a decade, so clearly something is working, and yet I have always been terribly, ridiculously inconsistent about my marketing. I always have been. I don't really seem to get any better. In the past couple of years, I'd say the wheels have fallen off the marketing machine even more, in a number of different ways, some of them relating to the pandemic. In other ways, in the last couple of years, it's been easier because I now do have support to help me keep that marketing a bit more consistent. But in the earlier days and the earlier years, I didn't. And yet I have found that even through being inconsistent, my business ultimately works. And so I've come to conclude that while consistency, yeah, it's important, right? Would I have an even bigger, more successful business if I did more consistent marketing? Almost definitely. But I don't believe your business will fail if you're not being consistent. And I also don't believe that consistency is the thing that makes the difference. I think there are other things that make a much bigger difference than whether or not you're being consistent. So I want to talk a little bit about, the difference in the early days and what it looks like now in terms of my lack of consistency. I also want to tell you a bit more about me and why it is I struggle to be consistent. So when I started my business a decade ago, I was really very unwell. I had a long-term chronic health condition. I struggled even to get out of bed some days. I had ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. Over the years since I started my business, my health has improved, but I've never come back to the point where I would say I have a really full to bursting energy bucket. So I'm not able to push and juggle and take on as much as some other people. I've also got a more sensitive system, so if I take on too much, I will burn out more quickly than perhaps the next person. Secondly, although I'm not formally diagnosed, I very strongly relate to a lot of the traits of female Asperger's. And what that means for me is that I really don't do well with juggling lots of different things at once. I get easily overwhelmed, and while some people might thrive on having a lot going on in their life and their business, for me, if I take on too much, it quickly leads to overwhelm, which leads to unhappiness and depression, and I find that I'm not enjoying the business. So I've learned that while I can be very go, go, go at times, I can be quite high energy, especially if I'm running launches or I've got a big new project that I'm working on that feels exciting. Most of the time, I'm at my best when I keep my business and my life as simple as possible and as uncomplicated as possible. So as an example with me, sometimes I will even delay booking to go on holiday just because the idea of packing for the holiday and everything that involves in getting to the airport just feels overwhelming for me. It just feels like too much to do to be able to enjoy the holiday when I get there. So, I do find that I need to design my life and business to be simple. And just the other day, I was listening to a podcast by a very, very successful businesswoman, and she was talking about the importance of content and the importance of visibility with your marketing. And she really drummed it home. Like the most important message she had was you have to be consistent. She was really clear and really direct. You will not be successful if you are not consistent. And so if you're not being consistent for whatever reason, whatever's going on in your life, get over it and get on with it. That was sort of the message. And it struck me. I thought, well, that's not really me. You know, that's not how I've run my business. I've never managed to be consistent. Although I have had bursts of consistency, which is what saves me now. So I'll talk about that as well. Now, of course, it very much depends on how you define success. So this particular woman has got a multi-7-figure business, and I have a multi-6-figure business. We've been in business for a similar length of time. So clearly, in terms of financial success, she is much more successful than I am. Would I be more financially successful if I was more consistent? Probably, definitely. But actually, you know, what I have is a business that I love running, that doesn't burn me out, does sometimes, but on the whole, that doesn't overwhelm me or not all the time, that I actually feel I can keep up with. What that multi-6-figure revenue gives me is it gives me enough money to pay myself so I can have a good lifestyle. And it's very rare that I come across something I really want to do or buy that I feel I can't afford. I'm also able to pay a small team of people to support me in order that I'm not overwhelmed by doing all of the things. And this quality of life is more important to me than having the big business. And so I don't want to be constantly on a treadmill of marketing that I just constantly feel I can't keep up with. So you might be wondering, well, how does my marketing look if I'm not being consistent? Well, for me, my marketing looks more like a wave. Sometimes I'm doing a lot less marketing because my business is consciously structured that way. I work very hard in the autumn and winter, and I work a lot less. I take things a lot easier in the spring and summer. That's a conscious design. Other times I take on too much, I get overwhelmed, I get depleted, I crash. The combination of chronic fatigue syndrome and female Asperger's, they combine to have that happen, and it can happen quite quickly and frequently if I'm not careful. And so I just have to stop. Sometimes I have no choice but to stop. So one thing I can say with certainty is that I have never been consistent with my marketing. And like I said, there's a difference between what this looked like and the impact of this in my earlier years and the impact now. So let me talk about the first time I stopped being consistent. So good few years ago now, I had a regular content strategy going of fortnightly blogs that got shared on social media. And it was my birthday, and I was walking up to a restaurant with my friend who was also in business, and I was telling her about the pressure I felt, that even though it was my birthday and it was over the Christmas holidays as well, I really felt this pressure to go home and write some content because I hadn't sent anything out for ages. But I also shared I was feeling really demotivated, I wasn't feeling inspired, I didn't feel like I really had the energy. And she challenged me to just stop. Now, at that time, I had a real deeply ingrained belief. It felt like truth to me. The truth was, as I understood it, that if I stopped doing consistent marketing, my entire business would grind to a halt and everybody would forget that I exist. This is what I had been taught, and this is what I believed. Now, she argued the point that if I was to take a step back and recoup my energy, that I would come back and my business would be even more successful because I'd be creating genuinely inspiring, engaging content that came from my own inspiration rather than struggling to push stuff out when one wasn't really feeling it. So it was not easy to do, but I did. I stopped. And I stopped being in any way visible or doing any sort of marketing activity at all for 2 months. And then I picked it up again. And did it make any difference? Honestly, not so I'd notice. Now, you may argue, well, of course, Catherine, if you had carried on doing your marketing, your mailing list would have been growing, and therefore that next launch would have been even bigger. Well, yes, that's true. but I didn't notice any real difference. And my business certainly did not collapse around my ears when I came back to redoing content. People re-engaged with it. It was just like I picked up where I'd left off. Now, these days are a bit different. I still regularly stop creating marketing content and stop marketing for reasonably long periods. The difference now is that, number one, I've got a big back catalogue of pre-existing content that can be recycled, and I have a team of people who will repurpose it for me. So I can maintain a content marketing and a certain amount of visibility online without needing to be present and do anything at all. The other form of marketing I do is joint ventures and leveraging other people's platforms. So actively reaching out, creating new connections and new relationships, doing partnership events, being interviewed on podcasts, doing summits, doing things like this video. And again, I can be very hit and miss. I can go for very long periods of time without doing anything to generate new opportunities or develop relationships. And in fact, at the time of recording this video, it's 4 years since I did a big push on joint ventures and a big joint venture launch. Yet I'm still here and my business is still growing year on year. So the business still works. So it does depend on your definition of success, but you certainly don't have to be consistent for your business to work. I also want to talk about one of the reasons I can get away with being inconsistent is because I am consistent sometimes. So when I'm in a good place and I'm well and healthy and not overwhelmed, I can be consistent for periods of time. So because I'm consistent sometimes, this means that at the times that I am being inconsistent due to health challenges or just having taken on too much, I can stop, because those times of being consistent will see me through. So, for example, as I said, I have a big back catalogue of existing blogs, videos, podcast interviews that I can reshare and repurpose. I also have long-term ongoing relationships with key joint venture partners and raving fan clients who will promote me and my programs every single time. So I'm not needing to constantly go out and find new people. There is already marketing and visibility available to me without my needing to be pushing it all of the time, if that makes sense. So consistency. So is it important? Yes, but I don't believe that consistency is the thing that makes your business work. I really don't. I believe that it's far more important that you have a clear message that helps you stand out and that your ideal audience will respond to. This might be an overarching message about your business and what your business offers, or it might be a clear message about a specific program that you're offering at any one time. But that can be enough. Like, think about it yourself. How often have you seen somebody you've never heard of before roll past on your social media feed, and literally within minutes, you've bought a low-cost product or you've signed up for their mailing list when you only just came across them? That's because their message was strong enough. And so you can, so I really believe that a strong message that has impact when you do use it, even if that's not consistently, is far, far more effective than a lukewarm and generic message that you're sharing 3 times a day on social media, but pretty much you're getting ignored by most people. I really believe that the message, how you communicate what you do, is far more important than the consistency, and that's certainly proved to be the case in my own business. So a few things for you to think about. If you find the pressure to be consistent a bit of a burden, some things to think about. Do you feel like you're trapped on a social media treadmill? There are issues with social media and the algorithm, as I understand it, that there is more of a requirement to be consistent if social media is your core marketing strategy. I have personally never used social media as a means to grow my audience. I've only ever used it as a means to keep in contact with people who've already found me. So I've never been consistent on social media. I've never tried to keep up with the algorithm. So I would ask you, if you feel that you're constantly having to feed that social media algorithm monster and it feels heavy or it feels like a drain, is it the right marketing method for you? Could you find something that allows you to be a little less consistent? Could you do less? Could you be consistent on social media, but by doing less? How can you harness the times when you do have the energy for the output? So I used to batch create blogs by writing 4 blogs in a day. And then when I switched to video, I used to take a day every 6 weeks to plan the video, and then I would record 6 videos in a day. So I always had plenty of content in the bank ready coming up. And I know some people who produce all of their content for the year every January or every December, and then they don't need to worry about producing content for the rest of the year. So how can you harness the times when you do have the energy in order to enable you to be consistent the rest of the time? How can you get other people to be consistent for you? Last year, during COVID, I took off to live and work full-time on the road in a camper van. It was following a long-held dream, but unfortunately it did not go to plan. It was very stressful, and I didn't manage to keep up with my content or my marketing at all for quite a long time, actually, 3 or 4 months. But content still went out weekly to my mailing list and on social media, because my small team were able to keep the show on the road for me without my needing to be involved at all. Can you hire somebody to pitch for podcast interviews for you or to source media coverage for you? I have someone who sources my podcast interviews now, so I'm able to constantly reach new audiences, but all I have to do is turn up and do the actual interview itself. And even that I've put on hold at the moment. I've put my podcast sourcing lady on hold because I needed a breather from too much activity. So I've even parked that. I'm not doing, so it's okay to hit pause on things for a while you replenish your energy. Could you hire someone to do the large part of your content for you? So for example, could you create one 20-minute live video on social media weekly and have somebody else pick it up, put it on YouTube, transcribe it, turn it into a blog, send it out to your mailing list, turn it into social media posts and snippets, share it out across all the platforms for you. And all you had to do was create one video. Can you have someone else create content for you? I had this earlier in the year. I hired someone for a few months who was taking snippets from mentoring calls that I was doing within my programs and turning those snippets into blogs and social media content for me. I had no involvement with that. So, I checked it and tweaked it a little to make sure it had my voice, but very little involvement. So I would love to have you ask yourself, if there's 2 things that I'd like to wrap this up with. First of all, ask yourself, how can it be easy? If you're finding the need to be visible and do your marketing difficult, how can it be easy? How can you structure it so that you don't have to be active all the time? You can do it in bursts. How can you harness other people to actually do it for you? How can it be easy and still relatively consistent? And I also want to reassure you that you really can just stop. This has been the biggest lesson for me. I totally trust it now. I don't have any qualms at all when I need to take time off. I just recognize that it's far better for me to press pause for 4, 6, 8 weeks and not put anything out there. If that means I'm going to rest and replenish and come back firing all cylinders, I will create more engaging content. I'll create more authentic from the heart content. It will have more energy to it rather than continuing to push things out because you feel like you're on a treadmill. I promise you, your business will not grind to a halt if you're not putting content out consistently. Will it grow a bit more slowly? Probably yes, but what do you want? A great big business with a huge turnover, or a certain quality of life where you're actually enjoying the journey? I chose the latter. Each one of us is different, though. You might make a different choice. So how can you find out more about me if you'd like to learn more from me? My online home is my website, and it's sellingfromtheheart.com. If you go over to sellingfromtheheart.com, you'll find there are a number of resources there. One of the things that you can sign up to is a guide called Create a Business You Can Fall in Love With. And it's where I talk through some of my other principles around how do you create a business you actually love to run that doesn't feel like a burden that you created out of something that you used to run. And you can get that guide at katherinewatkin.com/love. As I said at the beginning, the thing I'm best known for, though, is teaching small business owners how to sell in ways that feel authentic, comfortable, and without using sleazy sales techniques. And if you would like to learn a structure for a very authentic, supportive sales conversation that feels good for you and good for the client and still gets great results in terms of helping you enroll people into your services and products, you can get my 7 steps to yes for an authentic sales conversation by going to katherinewatkin.com/7 steps. It's been a pleasure speaking to you today. I really hope you've taken something from this. Lots of love to you. Bye-bye.